Hey guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for coming out to the Northeastern University Pharmaceutical Industry Fellowship webinar. So we're going to discuss a few things with you today. I'll just kind of tell you what our goal is here. So our goal is basically to tell you about our program, but then to also provide you advice for fellowship in general, whether or not you're looking at the Northeastern program, whether you're looking at other programs, but just industry. So we want to talk to you a little bit about where we are. So that's Boston and biotech and kind of the difference in our culture here. So we're going to start out with that. And then we're going to move on to the Northeastern program itself and kind of the fellowships we have. Lastly, we're going to go over some tips for success. And this will give you an opportunity to kind of transition to the section where you can ask your questions. So we have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, but if you would like to ask questions as we go, things that you think of, just go ahead and submit those in the chat and we'll address them. So my name is Josh, so I'm going to be the moderator. So I'm just going to kind of lead the discussion here today. I am a clinical development fellow at Alnylam, and I graduated pharmacy school from MCPHS in Worcester. So this is us. We have 24 fellows currently. So we're from 14 different pharmacy schools, 9 different functional areas. So really the point there is you have a very diverse network to kind of learn from. I think for a lot of us, myself included, it's not just learning about my specific job, my specific position, but it's really learning about industry and kind of getting that holistic picture of how industry works, how the areas kind of overlap and interact with each other, and getting that really broad picture so that when you move into your career after this, you'll have a good network of people that you can rely on in a lot of different areas. So first we're going to go over Boston and biotech, and that's going to be our first speaker, Paulina.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. My name is Paulina, and I'm one of the first-year Global Medical Affairs Fellows at Vertex, and I just graduated from Northeastern University. And today I'll be going over a little bit about, why you should start your career in Boston and why that's going to make a difference for your career. All right, so Boston is really in the business of transforming medicine and revolutionizing medicine every single day across drug development, across research, and across medicine. In drug development, there are hundreds, if not almost 1,000 of biotech companies that are working on curing some of the world's most challenging diseases right now. And to give you guys an example, Vertex had a recent drug approval for Trikafta, which has the potential to treat up to 90% of patients with cystic fibrosis. A huge milestone given the fact that just a decade ago, there were no treatments that were available for the underlying cause of the disease. In research, we have some of the world's leading academic and research institutions that are really driving that innovation in drug development right now. And in medicine, we have schools like Harvard Medical School, and really helping our companies innovate to gain approvals and make those transformative medicines to make a difference in patients' lives. So Boston truly is the epicenter of healthcare right now. It's home to a city of drug developers, of researchers, scientists, healthcare professionals, and that's really fostered this culture of innovation, of really high energy, and the strong commitment to medicine and science. And something about Boston that's unique is really just that number of academic and research institutions, and those institutions have been really pivotal to fostering the development of drug development here in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. So when you're here in Boston, you have such a infrastructure between the hospitals, between the academic institutions and drug development that they really all kind of go hand in hand. So you get to see kind of that process all the way from when these medicines are being developed to when you go to an academic institution, you get to see new protocols being instituted that are now involving these new drugs. So it really is kind of an example of where you not only see the theory, but you also see the development, and then you get to see it being put into practice with patients, which I think for us as pharmacists is really rewarding.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, Boston really is this world's leading cluster of biotech. As you can see by these numbers, this is really where all of the excitement and innovation is happening in biotech in the country right now. And it's really a great place to start your fellowship, but even a better place to end your fellowship and really start your career here. When you step outside in Kendall Square, there are hundreds of companies that surround you. And so you have that network right outside your door, which is incredibly helpful down the line for post-grad opportunities and post-fellowship opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that's, really important to all of us as fellows. The end goal here is to be able to get a job, right? And when you're here in Boston, if you don't get a job at your company, because we all know when we enter these programs that that's not guaranteed, but you know that you have a wealth of different companies in any area you could think of, literally right across the street.
Absolutely. And so Boston is biotech. Every city here in the U.S. is kind of known for its own little thing. SF for its innovation in technology, DC for law and policy, New York City for Wall Street and finance. But Boston is really coming to be known as that epicenter of biotech. It's a city of scientists, of doctors, of drug developers, of investors. And so naturally, if you want to start your career in biotech, it really makes sense to come here. So I've said the word biotech a lot, but what does it really mean, and what does that really mean for you guys as prospective fellows? For the most part, most biotech companies are small, right? And so that infrastructure isn't there yet. Your teams are small, and so you're wearing a lot of different hats. You're fulfilling many different roles in the company. You're really building things from the ground up at a biotech company. And so what that means for you as a fellow at these companies is that you have to be innovative and you have to be solution oriented.
I mean, I think what you're really going to see here in biotech is you're going to be working literally on the cutting edge of innovative new medicines. I mean, you'll be working with medicines that we don't even know if they're going to work yet. We don't even know their potential yet because these are just starting out, all the way from preclinical work through phase 3. But you could actually see the entire cycle of not only a new medicine, but an entirely new drug technology being developed. So that really is kind of unique, where it's not just you go to a company, and you work on one small molecule program in one tiny phase. Here you can go all the way from picking a drug candidate that's not even a quote unquote drug. We're doing things like gene silencing. We have companies doing exon skipping. We have companies doing these brand new technologies that hold so much promise to really change the face of medicine. And you're going to be having an impact in these small companies from day one. I was literally still in my orientation when my boss was calling me to my first clinical trial meeting. And that's the role you're going to have here. You're going to be a key member of that team right off the bat, and your impact is going to be huge because your teams are small. All right, so now we're going to go to our next section. So May is going to talk about the Northeastern Fellowship and the program.
Thanks, Josh. I'm May. I'm the first year Global Medical Information Fellow at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and I'm a graduate of St. Louis College of Pharmacy. Today I'll go over a little bit about Northeastern Fellowships, what makes us unique, and what opportunities we have here with Northeastern and in Boston area. So Northeastern University is a large campus located in the heart of Boston, Massachusetts. It has renowned experience
Hi, everybody. Sorry, that cut out. So these are our partner companies with the Northeastern University Pharmaceutical Industry Fellowships. As you can see here, we have 6 new partner companies: Flexion, Ipsen, Bluebird Bio, Blueprint Medicines, Takeda, and Wave. As Paulina had spoken about, this is really where you can jump onto a small company where there are a lot of opportunities to play a large role in small teams. And as they're recruiting for new fellows, you'll be able to really start the foundation of your program there. And we're recruiting in 8 different fellowship functional areas, as you can see listed at the bottom of this slide.
And I think something you have as a fellow at a new company, my company that just started my clinical development fellowship last year, what that's really given me the opportunity to do is to define that position myself. Right now I work in clinical operations. I'm the only fellow there. I'm the only pharmacist there. So I've really been able to expand and define that role and kind of let industry know what pharmacy can contribute in my department. And I think that's something that will not only benefit me, but it will benefit the other fellows who come behind me to give them those critical opportunities. And the fact that we are continually expanding, I think, shows 2 things. It shows, one, that Northeastern is really committed to this program and to getting more and more opportunities for industry pharmacists. And also that, all these companies are coming in and wanting to join, and they see what we're doing and it's valuable.
Right, those are great points, Josh. Like, as the biotech industry continues to grow, so does our fellowship program, and you really have a great opportunity here as we're growing to really build that foundation. And it's an exciting place to be when you have that range to do that. So within Northeastern University, the fellowship program itself, you have the opportunity to learn and pursue graduate degrees in regulatory sciences, business, public health, and more at no cost to you. One of my co-fellows, Farida, is currently pursuing a part-time MBA, and I plan to start in the spring. Research, you'll conduct research projects and be able to publish scholarly activities, work with faculty at Northeastern and your co-fellows. As a Northeastern fellow, you also get to teach classes in therapeutics, health economics, and different seminars in both small group facilitation settings as well as large group sessions, and all the while earning a teaching certificate. And finally, as we've spoken about all this time, like, Boston has a lot to offer, both socially and professionally. We take advantage of it all. Like, even within our fellowship program, we network with fellows across programs and within ourselves, but also, I really try to go out and experience the opportunities here at Boston, MIT, Harvard, all the different academic institutions all have public seminars and public events and socials, and I try to jump on and learn as much as I can about technology while I'm here, and it's a really great place to be.
Yeah, and like May said, not only do you have the opportunity to do MBA programs and PH programs all for free if you'd like, you also get to teach too. Like right now I'm teaching an infectious disease seminar where I facilitate patient case discussions with new pharmacists. So you're growing yourself, but you're also helping to grow future pharmacists at the same time.
So this is our application timeline and process. It is a rolling application that's open, so I would encourage you to apply early as PPS spots fill up. On December 1st, our priority application deadline, all we require from you is a CV, a transcript, and a cover letter. It's a simple process, easy as that. From the time you apply, we will have phone interviews all the way up to that priority deadline, and then we'll hit mid-year and on-site interviews.
So the one thing we just want to stress here is that you just apply on nufellowship.com. So you don't apply through PPS itself. You just go straight to our website and apply. And I'll say here, one question that we get a lot from fellows is how can they, make an impact on the people who are going to be interviewing them. I think for us, one way you can do that is to show that initiative and really apply early. By applying early, you show that you're prepared and you're eager and that you really care about the position. And we actually review those applications as soon as we get them. So we do notice the people who apply early on and who really have put in the time early to get prepared for their fellowship. All right, so our next section is going to be some tips for success, and this is going to be David.
Thanks, Josh. As Josh said, my name is David. I'm a first-year Global Medical Information Fellow at GSK, and I attended Western New England University. I will be talking to you today about our tips for success as you mid-year approaches and as the fellowship pursuit begins. So with this first slide here, I wanted to discuss with you the 2 or 3 different types of interviews, if not most or all fellowships will require throughout this whole process. Particularly here, we'll be beginning with the phone interviews. So some partner companies will elect to conduct those, and those will be basic conversations where you'll have with either a first year or second year fellow, potentially maybe a manager. These aren't typically too challenging, and it's really just to get to know you as a candidate, some just general questions. Tell me about yourself, why specifically industry. So this is more of a conversation based, and ultimately that will be deciding if you'll be receiving an interview at PPS at midyear. And then at PPS, you'll be having 2 or 3 rounds of interviews throughout this whole 3-4 day time span. So beginning, you'll be meeting with the fellows or potentially with the hiring manager, and then you will progress over the course of those few days. Hopefully, you'll be fortunate enough to receive a reception invitation, and that's typically on Mondays and Tuesdays. That's more of a casual setting where your fellows as well as preceptors want to get to know you a little bit outside of the realm of the mid-year hall. And then ultimately, if you are successful, you will receive an on-site interview post the reception, and that typically is an all-day event. You'll be meeting with members of the team that you'll be working with come that July timeframe, and they really just want to get to know you and see if not only if you're a good fit for them, but you should also be reflecting and saying, is this a place I really want to be? I would even anticipate having a dinner in a more casual setting, and they just really want to get to know you through this on-site interview process to really solidify their decision.
Yeah, and I think what David said there that's really important is that it's also your opportunity to kind of evaluate them. So these are going to be the people that you're potentially going to be working with every day for the next 2 years. And, you know, taking those on-site interviews is really important. And I think that's because it's your way of, once you get it down to a couple companies, determining which one you really want the best. So it's really going to be about the people at that point, because you've already kind of determined the area you want to work in. So now it's who do you want to work with?
Thanks, Josh. That was really great insight. But I also wanted to work and build off that a little bit. So how can you succeed throughout this whole fellowship process? We all have pursued we'll have our PharmDs come July. We all have had API experiences, but also internship experiences. But really, what makes you unique? You also want to show your motivation for why you're seeking a fellowship. We all are in pharmacy. We all are graduating to become pharmacists. We all want to impact patients, but what specifically drives you to pursue a career industry? These are all things that I think you should strongly reflect and speak to in terms of your interview process with your preceptors, and make sure they know the real you and what really drives you. That'll be conducted through your whole phone and PPS interviews, and even throughout your on-site interview process. So beginning with your phone interviews, that will be more of a casual conversation. You want to ask good questions, thoughtful questions, not generic, what's your day-to-day like, but maybe what are some of the projects you're working on? In terms of the PPS interviews, those will be more with your hiring manager. So as I alluded to earlier, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions for your hiring manager that really may tailor your decision. Is this fellowship I really want to pursue? Is this fellowship really for me? So it's not only us getting to know you, but also you getting to know the people you work with, as well as the company culture. And you also want to find ways to stand out, whether that be with your unique personality or maybe some experiences that you have that you can really speak to on your CV. And then throughout your on-site interview, you always want to be honest and forthcoming when you are on-site. And if it is your job choice, you make sure that your potential preceptor knows that. And you really just want to be able to reflect on all the experience you had in ways that you were successful, maybe some things that you could have improved on throughout your interview process that potentially you may be able to work on during your on-site interview. So the next slide here is how to sell yourself. So you really want to know yourself inside and out. You are all submitting CVs, letters of intent. We do read them. So be able to really speak to your experiences and be very, very specific and intentional with when you're answering a question. Why industry? Why this specific position? And why this company? We all understand that we all want to pursue a career industry, but what really drives you? Find your stories. As I mentioned, we have completed API rotations, IPPs, maybe you have completed an internship at a pharmaceutical company, but can you really be specific in those experiences that really makes you stand out as a candidate? You want to be able to tailor a specific situation that you've had, that you experienced, whether it be with a student organization, something outside of school that really shows your characteristics, not only as a potential fellow, but also as a working professional, because you will be part of the team, specifically when you join an industry fellowship. And gather your thoughts. So before you speak, you want to be able to be clear and concise. Oh, just cut out there. I apologize for that. You just want to be able to gather your thoughts. So why, what, how, and when. So be able to really speak to those and be as specific as possible. And answer questions that are specifically ways that you can really show your uniqueness. So everyone has had their list of internships, their list of APPs, but be able to showcase what really makes you stand out as a candidate is crucial and vital in your success in pursuing any fellowship.
All right, so just to build on what he said there, I'm going to give you hot take number one. So hot take number one is that the people who interview you are not going to remember most of what you say in your interview. And the reason why is because they have to ask standardized questions to every candidate. So you can imagine when you're interviewing candidates all day long, you're not going to remember everything that every candidate said. So what is going to happen? At the end of the day, you know, the people who are making these decisions about fellowships are going to be sitting around and they're going to be talking about who the candidates are and what were their impressions. And so they're going to say something like, well, I have Josh's CV right here. It looks pretty good. And then the preceptor is going to say, who is Josh? I can't remember. And they're going to say, Josh was the guy who made nanoparticles and he plays guitar, remember? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember who he was. So there's going to be a couple key things about you that will stand out in your interview. So what you need to do is identify what those best-selling points for you are, but make sure they're on page one of your CV and make sure you highlight them in your interview. One good way to do that is make sure you have all the standardized questions down so that you rattle them straight off. When they ask you why industry, why fellowship, why this functional area, blow right through those so you can get to the questions that really matter and really emphasize how you're unique.
Thank you for the insight, Josh. And also, just to piggyback off that, I mentioned knowing your CV inside and out, but also preceptors want to get to know you outside of your CV. So what are some hobbies you do outside of pharmacy school? We know that it can be a hectic curriculum, but what are some things you like to enjoy that maybe you potentially could have a connection with your future preceptors are all very, very important. And on the final slide here for me, miscellaneous tips. So really you want to tactfully plan your interview schedule. So that is developing some sort of strategy. You will be having multiple interviews and there'll be a whirlwind of emotions. You really will have a very, very packed schedule, but be sure to stay very organized. So you can either use your phone calendar or your paper calendar and try to provide yourself some time to reflect on your interview experience. What are some things that you really thought you excelled in? What are some things you could really work on? Are all very, very important as you continue this process over the course of those few days. And you also want to allow for follow-up with your potential preceptors and fellows. You always want to exchange contact information because you don't want this conversation to end there. You always want to be able to follow up. Maybe you can jot down some notes that you maybe potentially ask them at the next interview session. So always be able to give yourself that time to reflect and also be able to decide and rank your fellowships that you have interest. Maybe a fellowship you thought you would really work well with isn't your top choice anymore. So you always want to give yourself that time to reflect before the end of the day, throughout your interview process, continuously, and be able to improve every interview that you have. And then some small tips for the reception at ASHP mid-year. You want to find ways, as we mentioned, to show your personality. Josh mentioned he played guitar, so that's definitely one of the personality traits and something he likes outside of work. But also you want to be respectful as well as personable with your colleagues, as well as with your future preceptors. It's also important to network with other candidates, because you may even meet your potential co-fellows at these receptions. So you always want to be respectful and understanding that you are all in this together. It is a process. You'll learn a lot about yourself throughout this process, and try to stay and get a little stress away as you finish up the process over the course of those few days. And then you also want to balance your time at receptions. So that's very, very important to have some sort of strategy in place. Which places do you really want to spend the most time with? Where did you see that you were really your best fit for a specific company? You definitely would want to spend more time there. That's not to say to decline a reception invite and spend your whole time at that one reception, but to be able to strategize how much time you'll be spending at each place is crucial. And ultimately, be okay with failure. Unfortunately, there's not enough fellowship positions for all the students that apply. This is really not the only way to pursue industry and find a career that is in industry. There are many other opportunities, whether it be contract positions, entry-level positions in different functional areas. But ultimately, this is not at the end-all, be-all. There are other ways to pursue a career in industry, and fellowship is a very, very common one, but it is not the only one. And
All right.
I'll hand it over to Josh.
All right, thanks, David. So now we're going to kind of move into the Q&A section, and this is really for you. So, there's a lot of kind of advice out there and programs starting up to kind of, try to provide advice to prospective fellows, and it can be really stressful, and some of these things cost a lot of money. So what we're basically here to do is to give you that for free. And so we want you to take advantage of it. We want you to ask us, the real questions that you really want to know about what it's like to be a fellow. So we have a few questions that were submitted ahead of time online. So we're going to go over those, but feel free to put any questions in the chat if you think of anything. So our first question here is, to expand on the Northeastern requirements and opportunities versus the opportunities that people have at other fellowships. So I can kind of speak to that. So here at Northeastern, the program is much less structured, I think, than it is at other programs. So what that really allows you to do as a fellow here is to guide your own plan for what you want your fellowship to accomplish. And I think the reason I find that so helpful is because, the functional areas are very different. So the kind of professional development or the kind of research experience that I might want in clinical development could potentially be very different than a fellow who's in medical affairs or medical information or commercial or something like that. So you really guide your own learning here at Northeastern. But at the same time, Northeastern is a huge research university, so you have all of those resources at your fingertips once you decide what it is you really want to get out of it. And you don't do that on your own. You don't do that in a vacuum. You do that with talking to all of the other co-fellows, talking to the professors at Northeastern, talking to your preceptors, talking to other people at your company. So you really have all the support you need. But at the same time, you have all the freedom to really get what you want out of the program at Northeastern. So another question we have here is, what opportunities for professional development events and experiences does the fellowship offer? Paulina, you want to take this one?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. There are plenty of professional development and networking opportunities available with this fellowship. So we currently have a committee that's in charge of, planning these events with faculty, with leaders in the industry, planning for us to go as group to TED Talks and to speaker events at Mass Bio. And then just within Northeastern itself, we host a lot of events, with MCPHS in order for us to network with other fellows and other leaders within the industry. So there are plenty of opportunities. It's really up to you to kind of, make the experience what you want of it. But in addition to all of those events as well, as May mentioned, we also have opportunities for teaching and to get your teaching certificate. So there's a lot of opportunities available, I would say.
All right, so the next question we have here is going to be how do we view the opportunities after fellowship for Northeastern Fellows? David, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, definitely, Josh. So how do I view the opportunities post-fellowship in the Boston area? So as a lot of us mentioned, that this fellowship is mainly focused in the Boston area. So with multiple biotechs, there's plenty of opportunity. Right when you walk out of Alnylam, you can definitely see 10 biotech buildings, and these are all startup companies, new companies that may be pre-market or post-market. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you to be able to pursue post-fellowship. It is not a guarantee that after you complete your fellowship that you will get a full-time role at your partner company. So it's always important to keep your options open, reflect on what experiences you've had throughout your fellowship, be able to leverage those, and ultimately be able to pursue other options if need be. It's never a guarantee, but our ultimate goal is to be as marketable as we possibly can be. And with our fellowship, there are plenty of options, specifically in what we are looking for in the greater Boston area. And yeah.
Okay, so the next question we have here is what advantages do the smaller companies, so like Blueprint, Flexion, Wave, bring during a fellowship compared to larger pharma companies? So maybe our Veristem fellow, Alex, can answer that one?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm the Medical Affairs Fellow at Veristem Oncology, a small hematology oncology biotech in Needham. And before I answer this question, I just want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you're finding all this information helpful. So when I think biotech, I think broad, hands-on experience. I think the scope of your projects and responsibilities is wide, and you're going to get involved with a lot of really high-impact deliverables. You're going to learn how to problem solve, because often at a lot of these smaller biotechs, the processes and the infrastructure might not necessarily be in place. And in fact, even as a fellow, you might be the one creating these processes and infrastructure. And what that ultimately does for you is you're going to have a strong foundation by the end of the fellowship, because quite literally, you are learning how to build a company from the ground up. Other sort of benefits in working in biotech, so it's very easy to get a lot of visibility and connect at a biotech company. It's also much easier to get things done, so you don't have to do a lot of meetings in order to move the needle. And when talking about the end goal of a fellowship, meaning getting a job, I do think it is easier to get retained. And given all the experience that you have by the end, I think I feel very confident by the end of the fellowship, I will be very marketable.
Awesome, thanks, Alex. So we just had another question come in. So this question is, obtaining industry rotations P4 year is tough, as we all know, especially if you would like it before mid-year. So what other experiences would equate to internship/rotations in industry that might help a candidate stick out for post-grad fellowships?
Hi guys, this is Ralph. I'm actually a second-year medical information fellow here at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and this kind of whole recruiting process has given me a lot of insight into what candidates end up making really great fellows. And I think this is a question that we get pretty often, oh, I don't have industry experience. What do I do? A lot. And as you said, it's sometimes a random process. Not everybody, depending on their geographic location, even has access to this, exposure to industry, being able to do an industry internship or an appy. But at the end of the day, for me, as I'm reviewing candidates, it's I don't think that these experiences really can make or break a candidate. I think it can provide really good reasons as to why they're interested in the industry. But for me, we all recognize as people who are hiring that we cannot bias based on someone having access to an internship. I think for me, if you are somebody who doesn't have an appy or an industry related experience, look at your CV, think hard rather about your last 6 or 8 years in pharmacy school. What have you done to fill your time? This is my opinion, right? So what have you done outside of studying, have you done to kind of show that you're able to kind of take on different things, different leadership roles, different participation in community service. I think just taking initiative in anything, in any type of extracurricular, to me shows that you want to better yourself, right? And I think there's a lot of foundational skills that you can transfer from maybe a leadership position that you had, or even not a position. It doesn't even have to be that you were the president or the vice president. Even just taking initiative in one specific committee or one specific example of a project that you worked on, and really try to take the foundational skills that you see are needed in the job that you're applying for. What foundational skills are needed, and how are you showing that from your example? And that's kind of going back to that point of being specific. So I would say it's not, at the end all be all if you don't have industry experience. Think about what you do have and exploit that to figure out foundationally what have you learned from those experiences, and how can you apply that based on the job description that's in front of you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That was really good. So I'm going to take a question here. So we got a question come in. It says, looking back on the application process, what is something that we wish we had known or done differently? A lot of things I probably would do differently looking back. One, I will say I applied to too many companies to start off. I wouldn't apply to more than 10, or it's just going to be too much. And what you really want to do there is you want to focus on the companies you really care about. And the reason why is, a lot of us, when we apply to fellowships, we get nervous. We know these are very competitive. They're getting more competitive every year, and we're worried that we're not going to get one. And so, some people have a tendency to take a shotgun approach and just apply to a ton of different fellowships. The reason that I would recommend against that is because it's really a zero-sum game when you get there. You have a limited amount of time. You have a limited amount of resources. And the time that you spend, on companies where you don't really want to be is going to take away from time that you spend learning about the companies you really care about, and it's kind of going to dilute your knowledge base. And so what I would say is, do the research to find what you're really passionate about, and then focus all your time there.
And this is May. Just to talk on the flip side of that, like for me, when I was doing the fellowship process, I actually applied to very few companies, which in, an upper hand, I was able to really prepare very detailed for each company and narrow down, really be relaxed during mid-year. At the same time, I didn't really explore my options and see what really was out there. So I think in the end, you really have to know yourself and know what you're able to handle at mid-year. Don't book up your schedule and apply to a billion programs if you can't manage all of those interviews. But at the same time, don't sell yourself short and believe in yourself that you may be a good candidate for programs that you might not have considered initially. So those are two sides of the coin, and everyone has their own process. And it's just what you think you can do.
Yeah, one other thing I would also like to say is, once you get to the point where you're actually going through the process at mid-year, we have a tendency to kind of overanalyze every situation. A lot of us, pharmacists are very analytical. We're used to analyzing tiny little details and trying to figure out what they mean. I would say, don't do that. Be prepared, but don't try to read too much into interviews. Don't try to read too much into what's going on. Stick to your process. Be confident. And that's really the best way to be successful. I will say, I actually know for a fact that a couple of things I thought from what I thought were cues from people who were interviewing me, when I became a fellow later and actually talked to them, I had analyzed the situation completely wrong. So don't try to read too much into it. Just be prepared, be confident, and follow your process, and it'll work out. So we had another one here that came in. Why did we choose to do fellowship versus residency? So maybe Ralph can take that one as well.
Sure, yeah. I think this is another question that's very popular in trying to navigate, I want to do potentially a residency. I'm trying to pick between that and a fellowship, and it's really what seems right to you. I think, I tell anybody who's in any stage of pharmacy school that you technically have until the fall of your last year to figure this out and to keep an open mind up until that point, because if you start going on rotations in the spring of your P3 year, you don't want to go into rotations knowing, okay, I'm definitely going to do fellowship. And this is for, advice for anybody who's a P3 and below who is on the phone. For P4s, you kind of have to make that decision at this point because we're in November already. But, I think that there's, think about like a lot of the PharmDs that I've met who work in the industry now have had residency training. So it's just one of the paths. The fellowship is one path, right? There's community pharmacists who go into the industry down the line. There's hospital pharmacists that do it. There's residents. My co-resident Caitlin, my co-fellow Caitlin, she was a resident prior. She did a PGY1 prior to coming to industry. And so I think do what you think is right. There are a lot of careers in the industry, particularly in medical affairs, that a residency kind of having that residency training helps you do your job, right? So I think I like to kind of describe it that PharmDs bring that clinical knowledge to the table in the industry. A lot of the times, for example, if you work in commercial, for example, right, there's a lot of business-minded people at the table. You bring that clinical experience and that clinical knowledge and just that kind of foundational pharmacy knowledge of knowing how the healthcare system works. And I think that if you can do a residency, it may help you in your potential future role in the industry. So I tell all of my the people that I graduated with who did a residency that industry is an open door for you. It may not be as easy potentially as getting a fellowship, and you may need to apply to a bunch of jobs before you get it. But you have the opportunity still because you have the clinical knowledge, and almost brings more stuff to the table, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. But that depends on the role, right? So kind of weigh that out. Think about what interests you about the industry. And if you think potentially that more clinical knowledge may help you, maybe you can think about doing a residency. And luckily, sequentially, right? Fellowship happens. You're interviewing at mid-year. Technically, a fellowship, if you don't end up getting a fellowship or it doesn't look like it's going well, you can still apply to residency. There is that window, and I had a couple friends who did this, where they applied to fellowships, then they ended up applying to residencies. So sequentially, it allows you to kind of think about that. So don't close the door yet. You never know what's going to happen, and always, as David says, anticipate failure, because you can say my top choice is my top choice. I want to be there. I don't want to be anywhere else. But it quickly changes. So be open to these things. And this year is kind of that year of uncertainty, but it's a kind of beautiful uncertainty where you have, who knows where life will take you. So my general sentiment is keep an open mind. Who knows where you'll end up.
All right, so we have a couple of questions that are just kind of basic. So I just want to kind of say as a disclaimer, this is more for like the whole Northeastern program. So a lot of things regarding the specific positions themselves are going to be unique to those positions. So things will vary. So like what people are looking for, particular attributes of a candidate, those will really vary by company, and they'll also vary by functional area. So what I would do is look at what you would need to do on the job. Now, there's going to be some things that are broadly applicable skills. So anywhere you had a team-based project, that's going to be valuable. Anywhere you had leadership, that's going to be valuable. If you had a time-sensitive deliverable, if you had to interface with other professionals, those are all going to be things that are really broadly relatable. And then from there, you can kind of drill down into look at your specific position, because the skills that someone in clinical development is going to be looking for are going to be very different than someone in, commercial, because the nature of the job is just very different. So that's really going to vary, but there are those kind of broad skills that that really all fellows are looking for, and those are really the kind of skills that will just make you successful, in work and in your professional life in general. I'll also say, things like when you come to your on-site interviews and stuff like that, those are all going to vary by company and position. So you may need to present, you may not. It really depends on your program and what skills they're looking to really evaluate as they bring you on site and get to know you better. But, one thing I would say is keep an open channel of communication at all times. So if you, when you get the call and you get offered an on-site interview, ask them, do I need to do a presentation? Ask them what it's going to be about. You should really, at that point, you should have a pretty high comfort level with your potential co-fellows, with your potential preceptor, and, feel free to ask them. There's nothing wrong with asking a question if you don't know. So, always ask and reach out and keep those lines of communication open. So on that note, I would just like to say thank you to everybody for coming out to our webinar. We really appreciate it. As far as the specific questions, we're all on LinkedIn, and the thing is here, that I'll say, we're all co-fellows, we're all friends here. We all know each other. We all talk to each other on a regular basis. If you find one of us and you have a specific question that's better suited to someone in another company or another department, we have their contact info and we can forward it on. So, anyone in the program is always willing to help you. And if we're not the person that you need to get to, we'll get you to where you need to be to answer your questions. Be transparent. We're always transparent with each other, so it's not in the formal way that, we're going to go to one fellow and tell them exactly what's going on, but we all talk, we're all friends. So, we get questions sometimes about if we will see where you apply in other programs and stuff like that. Not technically, but you got to remember that we have a very close-knit fellowship community here. Even with, 24 people, we all talk, we all know each other. So be transparent, and we'll always be transparent with you. And if there's something you want to know, feel free to ask us, and we're always happy to help. So what we've got on the screen here is a really helpful site that we recommend. So this is a27p.com. This is kind of get you through the nuts and the bolts of the process. So if you want to see templates for cover letters, templates for CVs, if you're looking for specific interview questions for when you want to practice with your friends, there's specific interview questions here, and do that. One way that you get better at interviewing is by practicing, just like anything else in your career. So pull down those interview questions, have your friend ask them to you, see if you have good answers, and really think about what your answers are, kind of evaluate where you're at, and if your answers are meaningful, and if your answers were something that if you heard, you would want to hire someone. Because at the end of the day, we're not hiring a CV, we're not hiring a cover letter, we're hiring an individual that we want to work with, and we're hiring an individual who we think is going to, really help our mission at our organization. All right, so just kind of a few last points to cap everything off. One thing we really like here and one thing we really value here is that at Northeastern, you have the opportunity to shape your fellowship experience. So you have all the resources you need at hand to be successful, and where you go from there is really up to you. You're really in the driver's seat of your fellowship. And then outside of the program, you're really at the epicenter of biotechnology. You have all these new developing therapies and ways of treating patients that we couldn't have imagined, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Even when I was an undergrad a few years ago and we were talking about brand new technologies, these companies in our program are the companies that are now bringing those things to market, 5-10 years later. So you really get to be a part of something really important that's developing. And, you really have a large impact. They're small companies, and that means that you're a lot bigger piece of the pie. You're a lot bigger piece of every single project that you work on. And you will be relied upon, and you will be a critical member of that team. And, that's really, really rewarding at the end of the day to know that, not only did you get a lot out of this, but you also gave back a lot too, to your company. And as pharmacists, we know at the end of the day, these are drugs that are going to patients, right? I mean, the thing is, we have companies creating therapies that did not exist. And we have patients who, just a short time ago might have been told that they had something that had no treatment, that had no cure, that had no therapy, and there was no hope for them. And, we really provide that. So in our own little way, we help to make a real difference. And I think, taking it all back to, being a pharmacist and what does it mean and what does it mean to be in industry? And it really means that in your small way as a fellow, you get to make a critical impact. And then when you move on, you're ready to take that impact to the next level at your, wherever you end up after the process is over. So if you'd like to join us in the process, go to nufellowship.com. The applications are currently open right now. We are reviewing them, and we're ready to receive your application. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we will get you to whoever it is to best answer your question. Thank you so much.